Okay, so in the past, Wade pulled information about which electronic collections were active at each institution. And it was, I think the last time he was able to do it completely was in 2020. It may have even been 2019. So I spent some time last week pulling all of those. I kept it pretty simple because I wanted kind of a high level view. I think I'm going to go back and add more to that analytics report and possibly run it again. But I think we can still learn a lot from this set. So basically, I've got everybody's, and what I pulled was any electronic collection that's life cycle was in repository. So this is stuff that's active, that's not active, that you've done electronic portfolios for, things that you may have activated simply to have a single portfolio, so like a single journal from a collection. So it doesn't really give a ton of detail in this. But what I thought was really interesting was just seeing what collections most people have. Like, and obviously I could sort and try and figure it out that way, but I did a pivot table instead, and have this nifty little pivot table that tells us what the collection name is, and then and I use the public name, not a public name override. So if you've named it something else, it shouldn't have gotten goofy. And then how many people have it active. So quite obviously, these three are part of the formerly state ProQuest package. But then it was also interesting to see, was ABI Inform also part of that? I didn't really know. I could probably go back and look and check. Yeah, okay. And then Project Gutenberg, most used free collection. I literally just did this last week, so this wasn't anything I presented to LLC. I just thought it was a good place to start with, like, what are our most used free resources? If we know that they work really well, like, should they not be active everywhere, so that students can find the same stuff? E-library is part of the ProQuest package. So it's interesting that only 20 institutions have it in their repository.
But some of these are like for lower level, like we don't have some of our elementary school pieces of some of these packages activated, and e-library is one that's kind of on the edge. At least that was our determination.
Yeah, and that totally tracks, especially with, especially when we get down to more of the subject specific ones, because you've got some, like, not everyone is going to need ag econ, or some, it was nice to see that, like, about half of the group does have a pretty decent EBSCO package. So that's kind of like just a good thing for me to be, looking at as far as perhaps securing, equitable collections. How many of us have art store? Obviously, like, I'm guessing that more of you actually have Gale than this, because if we look up at Gale 1 file, there's 13, but then in context there's 12, and I know that many of you are not activating that collection just because it's such a nightmare.
Opposing viewpoints is an add-on, like it's not part of the state package.
That's right. Yeah. So, and this doesn't necessarily mean that it's even active for search. It literally only means that it's in the repository. So it could be suppressed. I didn't like pull that. And what else was, yeah, so here's like this collection, which I had never seen or heard of. So like, I was like, okay, well, I want to investigate that. And, you know, films on demand. But anyway, so this was kind of my very, very high level, like undetailed first pass at just seeing what was activate, what was there in places. What I discovered also is that some institutions have the same collection, and they're like, so you've got it in there twice, and one is activated one way and the other is activated another way. So that's, you know, like something to look at. And then there's really no way, like at some point, if there are collections that I'm like, oh, these are one or two journals, it'd be interesting to kind of see which journals are activated. But like, I am not familiar with this collection at all, but yeah. Anyway, so I was doing this, but I thought it might be useful for me and for you guys to then go into that analytics report that I built and kind of build it out some more, so that it's not an iPad substitute, but if this, like, build it out so that if you have questions about your e-resources, you know where this report is and what's in it. So I'm going to go ahead and get into somebody's and access analytics. Well, I was already in it. That's okay. Bellevue has a fair, or Big Bend has like a fair amount of stuff activated, and I try to like build my stuff from my Big Bend account, so I know like then how I can erase it if need be, because I can't log in from someone else and then erase it. Okay, and since I had no idea what report Wade had used, I just built one from scratch. So it is in my Carly's tests folder for Whack to Click. And when we kind of go through it today and like it, then I will save it to one of the statistics folders. Okay, so it is electronic collections. So no, and then we can write a description and I'll make it very clear that this is like not for iPads accounting. It's more for like electronic collection auditing. And I only put this filter on it. And then very few other details for schools that have multiple campuses, and I think I only did it for Seattle and Spokane, but if others of you have, oh, and maybe Pierce, but then I didn't see anything different between the two. I did go ahead and add, I think, library unit for the collection, so that if North Seattle had something that Central or South didn't, I could see that. So we've got, I only want to do collection level right now. And I've got the interface name and the public name. But is there any other thing in the detail? I mean, we're filtering by life cycle. And then I put in has electronic portfolio. And so some of the ones, so full text linking, full text rights, this one I want to add because that will show us if the full text rights are free. So I can tell it's a fairly accurate way to figure out if it's a free or open. I don't think search rights is necessarily useful. I think it's all going to be mostly the same. I think this is like collection ID. I might throw in here just so that I can see if people have different versions.
I would appreciate that one. Yeah, I've gotten tripped up before. And then if I want to go and activate something, I don't have to muck around with the name, right?
Yeah.
So that would be good.
Because I then started, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go figure out like which of these they are, and so then I have a whole nother spreadsheet with the lists of the, like, not the counts, just the list, and I was collecting like, is this free, is it, and I'm like, Carly, this is the stupidest way to do this, like manually searching each collection in the community zone. Come on, man, get smart. So yeah, other things from the bib record that might be, I never know if MMS ID or the, what is it, the collection ID is really the, and I don't think open access is as accurate as like the CDI full text rights, because it will do weird things with hybrid. One of them does. Yeah, so I think that kind of gives us some useful tools. Creation date, library unit. I'll go ahead and put library name so that if you do have multiple libraries in your institution and have some different activations going on. And I don't know, so like none of the, unless you have license information for your institution loaded, material type is kind of useless. So then service details, which one? Yeah, so there's service free. I was also thinking about doing like whether or not it's proxy enabled, because I have gone in to help folks and they've been like, why isn't this working? And it's because a subscription collection wasn't proxy enabled. So that could be helpful for some. Classifications, vendor interface, and I do have the collection interface name, and I think this vendor interface field gets pulled from acquisitions. So if you have vendor information loaded in acquisitions, and otherwise it's not going to get pulled, so I don't think that's useful. So let's take a look and see kind of what we're working with, and if there's anything. Yeah, so we've got open access. So it looks like, I hate that there's blanks. I'm like, it's a yes or a no, Ex Libris. Like, come on, analytics. Why is it blank? But there's probably a reason. Okay, so collection ID is the useless one. It's MMS ID. So let's take out collection ID. Oh, herd of elephants upstairs. And we can put this next to public name. Yeah, so this full text rights is a lot more useful than is it open access, because I'm not sure how it would say, you know, partially open access, and you'd have a whole nother thing for like the title level versus collection level. So this gives it all in one column. Big Ben only has one library, so if it hasn't been explicitly attached to the library, of course it's going to say none. But like if we went and ran this for Seattle, we might see different options here. So yeah, so is there other information that as you're doing an electronic resource audit would be helpful, and we can maybe try and find that field? Because I think, you know, like this way, if you save this to your own file, you can, you know, do an audit and filter based on whether or not it's active for search, whether or not it's proxy enabled, if it is subscription, if you want to figure out like which collection you have activated, you've got the MMS ID. And then my thought is, I'll go ahead and repull these. It was monotonous, but it didn't take too terribly long. And then I can make the full thing available. And that way you guys can see like, oh, you know, this is my, you know, like down the road has this collection activated. I'm going to go check it out. And I think it might be interesting for our Primo customization group as well, to kind of look at how, you know, different types of sources are showing up, and if we want to do some like usability changing on like the labels or something, to just know like, okay, well, we want to change this label and it applies to one electronic collection that one college has activated. Like maybe that's not a good use of our time. So, but yeah, anything else that anyone might find useful? I'm gonna save this, and then I'm gonna save as. So I'll keep maybe messing with this in test, but I'll move it into the okay, this is, because this is not statistics and it is not iPad. So I'll just go ahead and put it in electronic collections. And because, yeah, and I didn't even look at how some of these were built because so many of, well, not so many, but enough of the e-resources fields have changed and been deprecated over the last like 8 years that some of these may not be at all useful anymore. And I can check and clean them up as much as possible too. So electronic collections in repository is what it is. And it is just a list of collections with, was it like search rights, proxy status, CDI status, interface, that kind of covers it. And then I'm going to do not for iPads. So hopefully this little tool might prove useful for you if you want to do an electronic collections audit. And it can, I think it will also help me figure out like what you guys are using and you know, like what your students have access to. One of the things that I kind of struggled with sometimes was activating collections that I didn't think were great. I have a personal thing about opposing viewpoints in context. And not just because of the way it shows up and the weirdness of, you know, the records. But then I met with our education department and they were like, yeah, our students have to, you know, like put together lessons, and sometimes the schools they're teaching at don't give them access to their collections. And so, you know, and that's when I was like, okay, so all of the, like, this really shouldn't be used for college research collections. What I ended up doing was I activated them, and I think I put in the public, like in the public name, I did an override of basically like dash, you know, K through 12 content. And that way, if a result showed up, a student could very easily see like, oh, this isn't going to give me necessarily college level content. But we had a huge education program with a master's in education. So the ability for those students to have access to that kind of content was important. And I know some of you have early ed programs and some of you don't. But that's one way, by using that public name override and just adding something very short, because then it's not hidden in a description. And then I did also choose to take some of those out of our main A to Z list and just create asset links that I put on the education page, so that if a student was looking for general reference databases on our A to Z page, they got our like encyclopedia collections from Oxford and you know, ProQuest, but they weren't getting, you know, the Gale one that's like really K through 12. And I don't think I ever activated eLibrary either, Amy, honestly. So I totally get that. So anyway, that's that's kind of what I've been working on to get some more insight into things and help if anyone wants to do an audit. One of the other things that I'm very happy to do if anyone's interested is go through. So like if we do an electronic okay, hold on. I'm gonna go, where'd I put it? So if I go to Big Ben's and I see we've got Art Store is not active, that's probably because they no longer have the subscription. So if you're looking at something and you're like, oh no, it's not active, what's going on? We pay for this thing. You can, well, and I instantly forgot what I was looking at. Okay. Psychology and Behavioral Sciences collection. Don't worry, Amanda, I won't mess your stuff up. Okay. So we've got the EBSCO Psychology and Behavioral Sciences collection. And we can look at the service. So we're going to go edit service. And it is available. We are activating new portfolios automatically. Okay, great. The service description is full text. Our linking is good. It is proxy enabled. We've got 468 portfolios, and we know since it's automatically activating new portfolios, that should be good. You can leave your self notes here, or you can do that public note of, you know, K through 12 resource. Okay, got a history. Okay, and then so I've edited service. Then I like to go to review CZ updates just to see what's going on. And it looks like 3 years ago, they changed the parser parameters. Clearly that's working, or we would have noticed an issue before that. So we can dismiss all. All right, and then we go back. And now we save, we didn't actually do anything. And now we go back in and we edit collection. So we did service first and now collection. And this is where you could add a public override. So if you, one of the things I did was I got rid of all of the vendor titles in the title at the front. So we didn't have a million EBSCO and ProQuest and Gale. And I put it in parentheses after the name. So Psychology and Behavioral Sciences collection, parentheses, EBSCO. If you want to assign it to a library, so you know, like, okay, I have activated this specifically, like this is going to be my little queue, you can. You can see you've got the aggregator package, full text. Access type is current or perpetual. So if you purchase something, you can change it to perpetual. Here is where you can double check on your proxy. So if something's not going right with your proxy, one of the things that if your proxy settings change or you have two different proxies, Seattle has 4, for example, you have your default, but then if you only have one, usually that other selection is that same one. If If you think like, oh, well, I'll just choose the not default, but then your default changes and you have, so for example, because I'm sure this is not making a ton of sense, Yakima had on-prem easy proxy and they migrated to cloud easy proxy, and most of the collections were set to proxy enabled default. So when I changed the default proxy integration profile to the new cloud one, they changed. But then I had like a dozen or so that had been set to the easy proxy that was specifically the on-prem one, that didn't get changed. So I had to go in and like run a quick analytics report to see how many of those were stuck on the old one, because we ran both side by side for like a week to make sure things were working right. So then I changed them all to default. That way, if some, like if they have to change their proxy URL, they're all going to automatically update, like no issues. You can also get into all of the portfolio lists from this collection editor. But then the final tab, the CDI tab, is where you can see whether the CDI search is active and whether or not it's been set to only some titles, and then do not show full text in available in CDI, even if active in Alma. So these are your settings that are going to be specific to your subscription circumstances. Generally speaking, if you're looking at a full collection in an aggregator package where you're buying the whole thing, you can set it to we subscribe to only some titles. You can set it to no, because you are activating every single portfolio. Every portfolio is getting updated. And then the CDI ones are just going to affect how those show up in your Primo searches. So the other thing I sometimes like to look at, and maybe I should have pulled this into the report, was CDI last market update, because that's a good way to find sunsetted collections. So if somebody like ABI Inform changed their collection names, and I can't remember what it was, but I think they like created a new one from two of the old ones, and it's called Global. And if you look at some of the old ABI collections, the last market update was 2-3 years ago, whereas Trade and Industry and Global, it's within the last couple of months, because those are their active collections. So before I forget, let's go add that to that. Okay, CDI last market update. Let's see if we can find that in this. Okay, where do we think it is? Actually, let's just not, what? Okay, we've got active, available, full text, subscribe to only. This, we didn't put this in already. I'm gonna add it. Linking local, number of records. Let's see. Okay, so CDI update frequency. Not familiar with this one. Very frustrating that they can't just name it what it is in the rest of it, but let's see what it says. So yeah, so it says monthly, quarterly. These are, it should then, question is, I guess the ones that yeah, I'm not sure that's super helpful. Because it may have at one time been being updated monthly and now it just isn't at all. And that's certainly pulling a field that isn't something we see within the collection, edit collection or edit service windows. So I'm gonna not do that one. And so okay, all right, so we have portfolio modification date, bib modification date, electronic collection modification date. I'm gonna add that one and see if it matches. What's this one? Inventory, no. Vendor interface modification date. This one? Portfolio, no. Don't want portfolio. So as you can see, if you hover over the field, you can see the file path. And then you can figure out if that's because they give them the same name. And then you're like, nope, don't want it for consortium members. Okay, but we've added electronic collection modification date. We were just in that EBSCO psychology collection and it says it updated in May. So if we go down here to EBSCO psychology, okay, so June 21st. That's the market update. So where is that coming from? Okay, it's at the collection level. History. Okay, and it doesn't tell us what the modification was. But you can see though, like the last time anything happened with these collections was 2 years ago. And that can be a useful tool. Let's see. So yeah, so we might want to look at these because they have this very strange MMSID. So these might not be collections that exist anymore. Let's search National Newspapers Corps. Oh, baby heard my voice. So it should show up in the institution zone because we've got it. It's a selective package. It's available. Last modification date. Now I'm going to see what's going on in the community zone with this one. So Amanda, this predates when you took over this stuff, 2019. Yeah, so what we can see here is that, I mean, we know it's ProQuest, so there's only one ProQuest collection with this. in the community zone now. It's not even activated anywhere. It doesn't, it's a database. It doesn't have portfolios. So the likelihood that it is returning anything in a Primo search is almost nil. So this would be an example of, is it harming anything? No. But if you wanted to clean up your electronic collections, this would like be a pretty safe one to delete. Like, it's not supported. You can, it looks like, yeah, it was unlinked from the community zone because it no longer exists at the community zone. We can see if it's even got full text portfolios attached to it. It does not. So where does it link to? ProQuest. Yeah, so it's just, if somehow something shows up in a search and a student clicks on it, it's just going to go to the ProQuest main search page because that collection doesn't exist anymore. So anyway, just that's kind of how you can go about doing a collection audit. And what I like about this method is that you can, I hate how the thing like goes, the screen sharing block stuff. You can go through and be like, okay, well, this one is good. It's the way I want it. I'm gonna, you fill it in green. And then you look at, what was that? That was the ProQuest something newspaper core. And we're like, this one is probably bad. So you're like, bad. And then if you decide you do want to delete it, you can put a note that says, deleted from collection on X date, no longer exists in CZ, whatever. And then there's no question going forward. And you can keep a spreadsheet for yourself at your institution so that when you hand off your job, the person following you knows what the heck was going on, why things are activated or not activated. Yeah, I'm sure those of you who have inherited e-resources understand completely how helpful a document like this could be. And you can do it one thing at a time. If you pull the report and you have your spreadsheet and you find a problem as you're doing something else, you can go in and make a note of it. You can also, if you magically get 3 hours of time, go through one collection at a time and check stuff. And it's just all lives here. It's not dependent on what shows up in a results list here. It's based on an analytics report that then as you make changes, you can run that analytics report again and be like, okay, is this now looking more like what I expect it to look like? So anyone who wants to do an audit and just have a second pair of eyes as you're doing it, I'm happy to sit and share screen, and because it was so interesting, and I just really appreciate how each of our colleges, like, yeah, there were a lot of similarities. Obviously, we had 23 of the 26 places. Well, how many is it? It should be 23 if everybody has it, because that is accounting for the fact that Spokane and Seattle are single Alma instances, but multiple campuses. So like everyone has those first 4 collections. But then some people have, like, some people had hundreds of stuff in there in the repository and duplicates. And I'm like, you probably, I don't even remember who it was, but I was like, you are probably completely overwhelmed and inherited a mess, and like occasionally get around to deactivating something because you don't subscribe to it anymore. And then there are other institutions that only had like 70 things activated. And that could be the result of really good intentionality on what your students are using, or it could be that you're completely overwhelmed and you don't have all of your subscription resources activated, or you don't know which free and open collections are worth activating. So it was really quite a span. I want to say, as I was looking at totals, it was anywhere from, I think 78 was the lowest, and then I feel like 500 or some had, like, someone had so many. Okay, Orca and Winter Primo had to activate a bunch of stuff from EBSCO, from the alternative coverage. Yes, so I think there's probably quite a bit of cleanup that could happen with EBSCO collections. What I would do is I would go into your EBSCO admin and look at because that was what, 7 years ago?
Those weren't just EBSCO things that we had to activate, you know, like we had to activate collections that we never subscribed to from other vendors to try to approximate the content that was actually in our EBSCO databases. That was when EBSCO and Ex Libris refused to work together. And so we had to activate all kinds of crazy things to approximate the content.
Yeah, and I don't think that is the case anymore. I could definitely follow up with both our ProQuest. I bet Lindsay Leonard would know, the Ex Libris Alma support person, and I can follow up with not Bob Nickerson, but George Dragich at EBSCO usually can put me in touch with an answer about that kind of tech thing, but I don't think that's the case anymore. Let me get an answer for you before you start deleting or spending your time investigating, because it could be a pretty short answer. And then okay, so Highline is not activating anything for alternative coverage. Yeah, something tells me that these days, if like the worst is Gale, and we know the worst is Gale, you know, like EBSCO can sometimes be a little out of date, but it's not nearly as bad as back then. So, but let me write that down. Oh, yes. Okay. This is all ringing a bell, and I'm glad that there's so many of you who are smarter than me in the room. Moving to CDI, alternate coverage became a thing of the past because of the way that the new indexing works, and the way they match records. If EBSCO like says they have something, but like, yeah, CDI solved a lot of that. Yep. Yeah. I will triple check, but that sounds super right. Well, and one of the other things that I know happened sometimes when CDI went into implementation was that if you didn't go through and audit your collections, what got activated for CDI might have been goofy compared to what you had activated in PCI. And there are some reports we can run if you think that might be an issue. Because like what happened with me at Whitworth was CDI, like Alma pulled things it saw and activated it for CDI, but didn't always transfer the right stuff, or we ended up with duplicate collections because of PCI and then CDI, even though really the first collection that was already there just needed to be activated in CDI. It didn't need to be duplicated and activated in CDI. So yeah, and that was, when was that? 2 summers ago? Was it the summer of 2020 or summer 2021? I don't remember. But anyway, so yeah, there's any number of reasons why an e-resources audit could be valuable. And so anyway, that's what I was digging into and thinking about this week. And yes, okay. Logical sets and collections in Primo. Understanding correctly that collections are based on a logical set will be updated dynamically in the future. So collections of like those ones that you can make in Primo.
Yes, they have to be based on a logical or itemized set typically.
Yeah, if you do it on the logical set, it will be updated.
That's amazing, because right now I have to go in and delete everything and then reload it every couple of weeks.
Yeah, that was a big improvement. Yeah, so if you have a collection that was based on an itemized set, you'd have to create a new collection based on a logical set to get the automatic update.
But if we already have a logical set, then we don't have to go recreate it.
I don't think so. I'm gonna look into that too. Okay. Yeah, you can't edit an existing collection to go from itemized to logical. So yeah, that's hence the delete everything and create a new one. But yeah, I think they got the functionality of a logical set to actually work correctly this time around in the fix on that one. So yes, but I will check it. All right. I mean, it's probably not a stupid question, and also I might not have the answer. So lay it on us.
No, it's really dumb though. It's really dumb. I was in a conference last week and some people were sharing some really cool title lists. Like I gave myself a note because it's pretty cool. I don't know, like women, Black women in computer science, title list focused on that. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. Can I like pick those records out of a Primo list or search for them and pick them out and add them to some kind of list that I can share with the students, say. But I don't think you can. I mean, you can email them to yourself, and I guess then you can email it to a faculty member of a list of records. Primo records with links to our catalog, right?
Well, so if you're talking about like that kind of one-time use, so you've got a faculty member who wants some books that they can share as an example, you could certainly do it that way. But these Primo collections that Amy just brought up is another way that you can do it. So say you've got a faculty member who teaches modern African American literature every single quarter, you can do a Primo collection for your institution based on a logical set using any of the criteria you can build a logical set on. So
but the criteria would be that it's in this list, somebody else's list. So there isn't a tag, there isn't necessarily like,
so
and then we don't necessarily subscribe to all these resources. They may be discoverable and available for like interlibrary loan, but
well, so you can, so a logical set, if it's active in your institution and you do, you do the logical set based on keywords like African American, publication dates, whatever, it would create a list that wouldn't be that list, but it would be a list of African American literature that Whatcom has.
okay, because I kind of wanted to take the work that this group has done, acknowledge their work, because there's other resources that they've got going on as an organization, but I wanted to also then have it be local, but the logical set would be of our subscription or of our resources. Like if I can't find the records for these within the community zone, right? I think that was part of my problem too, is I couldn't, not realizing that I could build a collection from a logical set. I thought I had to only do it itemized. I was trying to look for these items, right, in the community zone and wasn't finding some, but I was finding them in Primo, so I was just all sorts of confused.
So what I did one time, because I wanted to do, it was right at the start of the pandemic and we were putting together book lists, right? To put something out. And I was like, oh, it's a top 100 books you should read in college. And so we did not, that was before Primo collections, or we weren't activating them because we weren't using them because there was an issue with network zones and Primo collections. But what I did was I kind of did a combination. So I made a LibGuides page where I did painstaking work and searched the titles of these 100 books in our catalog, and then used syndetics to create, and I actually did a gallery, so it rotated through. Then I, in the description for the page, was like, these books are from this list, by this organization, and I linked to that. And if I had gotten further with it, I think what you could do now is, so you've done the title by title work in in LibGuides, but then you could then embed a Primo search with certain keywords, or embed a Primo collection so that students could reference the original, reference one that you might not be able to update all the time, but at least gives them an idea. And then you would also have some kind of dynamic, here, go to Primo and check out what's in the catalog.
Yeah. Sounds like a pain in the butt. I wanted it to be easier. But because I couldn't figure out how not to do it so manually. And
if you send it to
instead of within one search or within Primo, it seems like our stuff is there, it's discoverable there. Why can't I curate a list there easily in order to share it there? It just
something is niggling at my brain. will you send me that stuff and I'll play around with it?
Okay, sorry everyone if I've co-opted the meeting. It was just it was driving me a little batty too. So I
Well,
will,
it could be a very cool project if we can figure out kind of a,
and it may not be there yet, but I'll send you an email.
okay.
Thanks so much for everything today.
All right, well, good questions. This has been, it's been good for me to get like feedback on how you guys, you know, make decisions about electronic collections and, you know, what's useful. So I will let you go as it is past 11. And I will see you next week. And yeah, we'll have something interesting.